Today, we're going to start to look at solutions. It's not all doom and gloom. There's some good things that have happened since the Green Revolution. How can we improve all the problems that we've looked at with land and water use? One of the simplest things we can do is look at local agriculture, growing things locally instead of shipping them all over the world. Now, we actually talked about this way back in August. Can totally see how the semester comes around full circle. Everything really is connected. So how do we use land and water without depleting or overusing and keeping everything in balance ecologically? Well, that's probably, in terms of definition, impossible. There are ways that we can make things more sustainable. So what I'm going to do this week is just give you a couple of solutions each day and kind of tie into the topics from last week. I'm also going to sprinkle in some semester review as the week goes by. This was introduced in August also, but I want to make sure you know the term sustainable yield. And that could apply to crops from a farm. It could apply to production of meat, the catching of fish. We want to make sure that we're producing, harvesting, growing what we need, and that it's replaceable. If it's not, then we have overharvested or overfished. Remember, that's the last part of HIPCO. HIPCO is anthropogenic causes that threaten sustainability. We also want to make sure that we're taking enough. It's pointless to not be comfortable in life if we have the technology and the knowledge to do it. So hitting that optimal sustainable yield. We'll talk about GMOs Wednesday, and those have helped us increase our sustainable yield. All right, the first thing we looked at last week was clear cutting, deforestation. And so how do we solve that problem? Well, there's a lot of different things that can be done if we're willing to pay for it and be patient. Clear cutting, remember, is fast and cheap. But if we go in and we do what's called restoration, where we replant what we take down, and then we cycle forest every 30 years or so. So we let it grow for 30, cut it down, plant a new one in its place. Leave it alone for the next 30 to 100 years. Another option is called selective cutting, and that's what they're doing in the picture. Instead of clear cutting, they're taking down trees that are old, trees that are not healthy, trees that block the high canopy so that young trees down below can't grow. So we have to choose wisely which trees we decide to take. That's also kind of the same thing as thinning the forest, pulling out trees that are not optimal for the continued growth of the forest. What is a prescribed burn? A prescribed burn is when it's controlled. We burn forests sometimes on purpose. Obviously, we're deciding what burns, when, how much, and we put it out when we need to. So these are professionals. You could work for the Forest Service, the National Park Service. What's the point of all that? Well, burning in a forest is actually a pretty good thing. It also helps thin out dead trees. It helps with seed growth of new trees. So there's actually some benefits to fires in forests if they are controlled. This is a video showing fire seasons from 2000 through 2017, I believe. And what you see is that there are cycles. A lot of these are natural fires that have been happening long before anthropogenic problems. The United States is not immune to this. Once again, it's a very natural thing to have fire. It's actually healthy for the ecosystem. Now, unfortunately, anthropogenic fires have been much worse lately. And we're linking that to climate change, global warming. This is a fire from 2 years ago out in California. Ironically, its name was the Camp Fire. Some of these have been caused by humans. California went through a massive drought, so everything out there was a giant tinderbox. And we see these pictures on the news of the fires burning in the mountains, right? That's a hard place for firefighters to get into and try to put that out. But to give you perspective, that fire was about as big as the entire inside circle of 465. Imagine all of Indianapolis on fire. How do we put that out? Well, in a lot of cases, we don't. We just let it burn out. What they do is they try to get in front of it. Firefighters will cut a line. They'll go through and cut a 10-foot gap of trees. And that way the fire gets to that edge and it stops. It can't jump across where the trees have been removed. But everything inside of that is going to burn. For decades and centuries and millennia, these fires weren't a problem because they burned in places where humans didn't live. But because of urbanization and sprawl, we now have fires that encroach on habitat for humans. And that's what the real problem is. It's not that forests are burning, that's not a problem. The problem is that humans are much closer to it now. That picture on the right is the only road out of the valley that was on fire. And so all of these people have to evacuate, like we sometimes see during a hurricane. And most of them are leaving their homes knowing that there will not be anything left when they get back. That's the price for living in some of these beautiful areas that seem like paradise until they're not. And here is what they come back to. Houses burned all the way down to their foundations. This is Yosemite National Park, a very famous rock formation. It's called Half Dome. This is without any filters. That is what the sky looked like for weeks during this year's burn season. This picture always hits home with me. In Indiana, the only thing that we really have big risk of is tornadoes. And most people around the Indianapolis area, it's been so long since we've had a big tornado around here that they don't fear them as much as they should, probably. And what always terrified me about tornadoes was the unfairness of it. The fact that your house could get completely obliterated, but your neighbor's house could be untouched. And here we see where the firefighters were able to stop the fire. So we've got one entire side of the neighborhood with absolutely nothing left, and the other side not even singed. I'm sure that the firefighters had to make very tough decisions on how to stop these fires. Because of course we don't want to risk their own lives in the process. Which of the following would be the best way to mitigate deforestation? College Board loves this word, mitigate. Mitigate basically means problem solve. What would be the best way to problem solve deforestation? Grow more diverse timber products to increase economic value. No, we'll want to cut those down still, right? Stimulate agriculture production, native vegetation close to it. That has nothing to do with forests. Employ clear cutting harvest techniques that are more sustainable. If you see the word clear cutting, that is not a solution to deforestation. That is the problem itself. So D, replant and protect trees in areas that have been cleared. Obviously, that is how we solve deforestation. Which of the following best achieves the goal of providing wood products? Remember, we need them, but also preserving biodiversity. Clear cutting large areas of old growth forest. No, clear cutting, naughty. Selective cutting of large areas of old growth. Yeah, take the old trees out, leave the good young trees to continue providing habitat and biodiversity. Prescribed burns, that's going to kind of take everything out if you're not careful. Planting large plantations in abandoned. Okay, so biodiversity problems there, right? B was the best answer. If you go to the Canvas page and you go to current lesson, don't forget that last Thursday I posted the first two review guides. Hopefully you've downloaded those at a minimum, potentially printed them off, start to build yourself a little review file. There was a quiz. A few of you still did not take that. I have posted something that Mr. Lance the other APES teacher, shared with his class. So he has a actual review guide with blanks. So it's questions. And it's all pretty simple stuff. I mean, it's what we covered. So this is a study aid. I'm not assigning it. I don't plan on going over it. However, the day of the final, we could go over some questions if you still have them. Once again, this is something that I would download and put with those other study guides because it's going to be very helpful in May. The whole semester packed into this document right here. Totally optional. It's not for points, it's not for extra credit, but it's just another tool for you guys to have access to.